All right, ladies, this screencast is going to start Chapter 10 notes. So you first need to pause if you haven't done so already and go and download the Chapter 10 outline that you see posted on Moodle. And we're going to begin with the Louisiana Purchase. So although Thomas Jefferson had always supported the limitation of federal government power, hence why he's a Democratic Republican, as president, he is going to exercise great authority in expanding the territory of the U.S. So he does have a large hand in increasing U.S. territory, which is going to involve him using some government power to do so, but that was typically not of his nature. The Louisiana Purchase will be the single largest acquisition of territory for the United States. Spain had secretly ceded or given back, ceded would be C-E-D-E-D, the entire Louisiana territory, including New Orleans, back to France in 1800. So that was something worked out specifically between France and Spain. And with France now controlling the Louisiana territory, but specifically the city of New Orleans, Jefferson is very nervous as president. He was concerned about having access to the Mississippi River via the port city of New Orleans. Keep in mind that many American farmers live on the west side of the Appalachian Mountains now because we gained that territory after the American Revolution from England, and they depend on the Mississippi River for trading of their goods, and so they need to be able to access that river through New Orleans. Jefferson was also concerned that Napoleon would try to push for an empire in North America again and get a little land hungry. So he wants to kind of nip this in the bud and kind of regain, not control, but security of the New Orleans port city. So he is going to send Robert Livingston and James Monroe, two American diplomats, to France to attempt to purchase New Orleans from Napoleon. Now, Napoleon's foreign minister will meet and work out a deal with Livingston and Monroe where they refuse to sell the city of New Orleans, but they do offer to sell the entire Louisiana territory, including New Orleans, for an upped price, like a higher price than what they would have just bought New Orleans for. Keep in mind, Napoleon is very preoccupied with the troubles he's having in France, in Europe, and as well as Haiti with the rebellion that was happening. He's in need of money, so he needs a large sum of money. And he will be willing to sell the Louisiana territory for $15 million, which would effectively double the size of the nation, because it's like 400 million acres total. Jefferson will agree to this pretty much right away, realizing this is too good of a deal. Keep in mind that $15 million is not worth what what it is today. It'd be a lot more money today, but it's still a steal for the time. For $15 million to get 400 million acres, it's like pennies on the acre. And Jefferson will argue that this strong use of federal power still fits his vision because it's opening up land for future farming opportunities. And that was kind of his justification. It was held as a triumph amongst Americans, but of course natives won't be as happy, as this will mean Americans are going to be moving further west further into Native American territory. Now, Jefferson will hire Meriwether Lewis and William Clark on an expedition to survey the newly purchased Louisiana territory and to survey that land. There's an importance in mapping here. You must know the land that you claim. You want to know exactly what you have your hands on. I know right now we're looking at this picture on the YouTube video. We don't see exactly this land when we purchase it from France. We know generally where the boundaries are, but those kinks have to be worked out. They will be worked out in official treaties in terms of the northern border. We don't have all the lines of latitude and longitude officially drawn out just yet, okay? But Jefferson wants to send Lewis and Clark on this expedition to kind of take in the land and see what's going on. Jefferson wants information about plants, animals, but also the people of the region, which are the Native Americans. Lewis and Clark do receive some help from Sacagawea, who is a Shoshone Native American female. They work hard to kind of establish friendly relations with the Western Indians, but that isn't always very successful. They do return after some time away, and their overall purpose of this expedition was just to open up a path for settlement. Jefferson fully intends that Americans will eventually settle this land, but for now they just kind of need to map it out. One other event that takes place kind of within Jefferson's time as president, that's kind of an additional legacy of the American Revolution, is the growth of education, okay? And kind of state-sponsored education. This idea really starts taking off during the time of Jefferson's presidency. There starts to kind of emerge this theory that democracy requires educated citizens. Like, to have an effective democracy, your people need to be educated. So the idea of becoming a self-made individual starts to arise and emerge. In a new world that emphasizes human equality and potential, people need the ability to determine their own fate, to have a say, and to have an opinion. One needs to be educated to be able to create that fate and determination for themselves. So, local governments essentially start regulating schools, and there is a democratic control of the schools that will ensure people are going to start fighting over, for long term, like what to teach, who to teach, how to teach it, how to fund it. But this is the first time we're seeing large scale local governments starting to regulate and implement school structure and educating their citizens and their youth. So that's what you kind of see happening in the picture there. So kind of a growth of education and a growth of educated citizens on the rise. There is no federally protected education. Per the Constitution, there's nowhere in the U.S. Constitution that talks about people having the right to education. It's all up to local and state governments to do that. All right, we're going to transition to a new event as well as a new president. This is going to be the War of 1812, and it's kind of considered the Revolutionary War Part 2. It's the event that will kind of reconfirm American independence. James Madison, Monroe's next. James Madison is now president. He's a Democratic Republican. And some Democratic Republicans are starting to push for war against Great Britain. Now, why would they want to do that? Recall that Jay's Treaty, which was our little agreement made with England over the, Atlantic conflict with our stuff being taken. Jay's Treaty was pretty much worthless, and Great Britain is still not respecting international trade. Impressments of U.S. soldiers are still taking place. British soldiers have not yet evacuated some of the forts in the United States. There are forts that were set up by British soldiers in the years even preceding the American Revolution, that even though they lost that war, they had not evacuated yet. So Democratic Republicans are pushing for war, and typically the men that pushed for war were called the War Hawks. Henry Clay and John C. Calhoun, two men you see pictured on the screen, those are the two most well-known War Hawks that are kind of trying to pressure Madison into going to war. Federalists strongly opposed the war, and that's actually going to come to hurt them in the end because the party will have its demise in the long run. Madison will eventually ask Congress for a declaration of war, and they do oblige. So we're going to see two of the big battles early on today, and then we're going to stop and save the rest for tomorrow. So the British will go on the offensive during this war. They will effectively invade Washington, D.C. They will push American defenses aside, and they will burn both the White House and Capitol buildings. You might be familiar with the story of First Lady Dolly Madison saving the portrait of George Washington from the burning White House prior to her evacuation. This is a story that often gets taught in middle school, I find. So the Battle of D.C. shows our national capital falling to the British early on. The British really have a lot more resources than we have, honestly, in the beginning of this war. Now, the British were stopped in the Battle of Fort McHenry. This battle takes place in Maryland. It is a American victory, but this is where Francis Scott Key wrote the poem in the morning of the battle, morning after the battle, the Star-Spangled Banner. That poem goes on to become our national anthem as a song. We will continue talking about this war in class tomorrow, so please write down any questions you have thus far from the screencast, and I will see you all tomorrow.